Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today is all about painting Yosemite. I do a lot of dry brushing here and some wet on wet, but I first start with a sketch of the landscape. I take this sketch from two photos that I found on Pinterest, and then I create the foreground from my own imagination. But to get the rock formation or the mountain formation, I did want to look at a reference photo. It's a very looser style. It's not necessarily realistic, and as you can see, I am just eyeballing my sketch. Now, if you want an accurate sketch, you can always print out a photo and then go over it with some what is that paper called? Why can't I think of it? Tracing paper. Go over it with some tracing paper and you can outline it that way. I am, absolute believer in utilizing tools. I think it's okay to sketch out a landscape or whatever subject that you want if it helps you. But of course, I am a lazy painter, and so I just eyeball things. Except recently I have been trying to paint some animals, which is a weakness of mine, and it has been very helpful to use tracing paper. Anyway, I go ahead and create the very far distant rock formations like Half Dome, which you can see right here, which is quite small because it's very far away. I added in some rocks and envisioned that I would then have some grassy area with some trees in the background. If you don't want to do a grassy meadow, you can always do water here. I think that would be really beautiful, and there's definitely areas of Yosemite where you look at this view and there's a stream or a river. I start the rocks with some lamp black, and to get it more on the gray side, I just add more water. Now you could add some white if you wanted. I love adding white to my watercolors. I know a lot of people don't like it, but I really enjoy it. And I continue to darken it by adding a bit more concentrated black. I also add in some brown, or in this case actually sepia. That has been my favorite warmer brown lately, and I love to mix it with my greens to create a earthy green. So we'll give that a try if you haven't tried the color sepia. And I just continue to do the same strokes. And I go, as you can see, in a vertical motion, because when you look at this side of the rock formation, you see lots of crevices, and it does tend to look like there are these lines and cracks going straight down the rocks. And you can add as dark and light values as you wish. I don't go all the way down because the base is going to be a bit of mist. Of course, if you know me and you've been here for a while, I paint mist in pretty much every one of my scenes because I have an obsession. Now the value of paint here is going to be quite light because these rocks are further away. While the paper is still wet, I added a little bit darker value of the same black that had a little bit of that sepia on my brush, and I just start dabbing it and then smoothing it. For the other side of the valley and the rocks, the crevices are not quite the same. They don't go straight down like the one on the left. They're kind of sporadic and everywhere. You'll also see above the waterfall that there are some trees, there's some green there. I do add a little bit of green. And I think the easiest way, if I were to go back to paint this again, I would actually do an overall wash, and I would not add dry texture just yet. So this first layer I would not do dry brushing, I would go straight in and just do an overall wash, let that dry, and then go in with some dry brush. And then you can add your shadows. And the reason I say that is because when I looked at what I was doing, or see it now, it does seem that parts of it are overworked, and I don't believe that an overworked painting is necessarily a bad thing. In most situations, it can, you know, not be so great, but then there are other times where it looks good, at least in my opinion. And if you don't agree, then that's totally fine too. But in this case, I do feel that there were parts where I had to overwork it, if you will, to make it blend a bit better. I did take whatever was left on my brush to give a little bit more definition, so that you could see that that was definitely Half Dome in the distance. If you find that your brush is getting too dry, then you can add, of course, some more water, or you can even mist your paper to move that paint around. Now, I always say this in every one of my videos, but I do want to emphasize and make it a point that if you paint like I do, where you do a lot of dry brushing, you are more than likely going to wear your brushes down rather quickly. And that is just the nature of what happens with dry brushing, but I'm okay with it because that's how I personally prefer to paint. So I know going into what I do that my brushes are going to fray. Now, I should say that I only use a certain set of brushes for my landscape, so so I know that I'm not going to use my other brushes for like botanicals, because I want to make sure that I keep those non-frayed and keep them in good shape. I add a bit darker values here to start creating more texture and some shadows. I'm studying two different images here. One is of an image in the fall, and the other one is an image in the spring. But both of the mountains are quite dark. And you can see that I did do the waterfall, and I kept the area where the water is white. So I kept the paper white to really emphasize that there's water there. Waterfalls are definitely something very tricky to paint, and I would not say that I am an expert in them by any means. But I do think that you can get quite good at whatever subject you want to paint if you keep practicing. So I know I get a lot of comments about the trees and how the trees that I show in my videos can be quite challenging and quite difficult, but I do encourage you to just keep exploring and practicing and take inspiration from my trees, and eventually you'll create your own way of painting the tree that you fall in love with. That's definitely what happened to me. So just keep painting and you will get a beautiful tree, or whatever you want to paint. I switched brushes here. I'm now using my gravy brushes. Any fine tipped brush or detail brush you use will work perfectly. And I am now just scribbling in, drawing in some lines, trying to look at my reference photos, and you can look at any Yosemite reference photo and it's all the same. Obviously it's Yosemite. I'm just kind of, figuring out where I want some of the texture. I added a darker value of paint here, more concentrated, because I wanted to show that there is some definition in the rock, that the rock is actually kind of coming out towards you. I added green here because that's what the photo had. I don't believe I would add green again, or if I did, I would add it in that initial wash, so you wouldn't see so much of the black come through. I also at the very end of the video add some green to the top of this rock as well. Now I am using the wet on wet technique here because I want this area to be a nice smooth blend. And you can see that brush is frayed. Do you see all those the bristles on the side? So that's definitely something that will happen if you paint like I do. I'm really rough on my landscape brushes. I should just emphasize that these are my landscape brushes. Sometimes it can be a bit annoying because paint can grip onto those little brushes, and as you move it, it can flick upwards or sideways, and you may get paint where you don't want it to. But overall, I don't mind. So I added in some different shades of green and yellow. You can use whatever greens and yellows or browns that you want to use. There's yellow ochre, there's sap green, deep sap green. Really, it's up to you. I think almost all yellows and greens go well together. I switch over to my Deerfoot brush to add in a bit more texture. You can smush it in, you can sweep it up, really it's up to you. When I sweep it up, I am trying to give the illusion of some distant grass. When I go over with a bit more details, you know, it will be easier to see. I also swoop my brush up with some green because that's where my trees are going to be. I love doing this for distant trees. It's, I suppose, a lazy way to get the image across of what's there. You know, I love details, but then I am sometimes lazy as well. Now for the rocks, I am using the same colors I did as the mountains, and I did not plan these as well because I do end up erasing or painting over these two smaller rocks in the end. And you know, I think with rocks, if you haven't checked out my previous video, I show some different elements that you'd find in a landscape, and I love how those rocks turned out, and I should have painted them that way, but I didn't. And I think for me it was more of the blending that I had an issue with, and then I tried to stipple in some color while it was still wet, and it didn't work. So I go ahead and leave those to let them dry, and then I go back to them. And I'll do some more stippling. And then I add in some detailed trees. I will have a updated tree tutorial in the future. I know a lot of you may be on my channel because of my tree tutorial, but that is quite old and I would like to do a better version of it. Let me know in the comments below if you would even like to see an updated tree tutorial. You can add lighter and darker values of trees just depending on how much water to paint ratio is on your brush. And you can see that tree was really easy because it was just me sweeping my bristles from left to right. And now that the rocks are dry, I am now stippling in some black, and then I add in some white, and then I realized it was too much, so I smooth it out. And this is the stage where the painting kind of went south. But I tried my best to save it. Let me know if you think it's not a very good painting. You know, it's fine with me. Not every painting is going to turn out well. But yeah, I tried to save it by adding in some grass, and I think I gave up too soon. Now, you know, there's always that phase in the painting where it's not great. And that's this phase right here. But I got impatient. And I was losing light because I always film right before it gets dark. I don't know what I'm thinking. This area right here with the yellow under the rock, I loved. I loved that so much, but overall I did not like how it was turning out. So I decided to paint over some of the rocks with some darker green and just made everything real dark which I like dark anyway, but tried to bring a little bit more life back into it by adding some yellow and then sprinkling in some white flowers, and I think it turned out okay in the end. And I lastly decided to bring back some of that grass that I destroyed with some white and yellow to make it a bit more vibrant. But in the end, I think it did turn out okay. I am happy with it. The rocks in the front, I'm not super happy with, but in all transparency, you know, here's a painting that didn't exactly go how I intended, but wanting to share it anyway. But anyway, let me know what you think, and be sure to like and subscribe, leave a comment below. Love to connect with you, and I hope that you found some inspiration in this video and let you know that you're not alone if you're messing up on paintings, because I do it all the time. But until next time, my friends, I'll see ya. Bye.